Morning, and welcome to Fantasy Football Coffee Break. I'm your host, Ben. Week 3 this week. Seems like the season's flying by. Could you do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe? Love you forever. Today, what we're going to do is we are going to go over some trade targets, preview the big games, and let's get it. They're one of the most fun parts of fantasy football. It's exciting. It's a huge dump of adrenaline, and you get guys on your team that you think are overperforming. You're like, I got to get rid of this guy now while he's at his peak. You got guys on other teams that are underperforming that you want to try to buy low on, but also you got to factor in that this is an emotional game, and people are going to be 0-2 and needing a win desperately. People are going to be 2-0, feeling in positions of power as they negotiate.
You underestimate my power!
So as you negotiate, a lot of those factors get in. But here are the guys I'm targeting to try to buy now. First one, if we're talking about a big name player, is Ja'Marr Chase. Bengals have looked awful. They just have. And the owner of Ja'Marr Chase is probably 0-2. He got, mostly because Ja'Marr got 4 catches on 5 targets for 35 yards and a disappointing 7.5 points. At this point, the Chase manager might be panicking, especially if they're 0-2. As I wrote previously and talked about previously, you know, if you start 1-2, you have a 39% chance of making the playoffs. But if you're 0-3, you know, you're looking at 16%. So there might be someone in your league 0-2 with Ja'Marr Chase who desperately needs a win to keep their playoff chances alive. Maybe you offer him a 2-for-1, someone in the Devonta Smith range, someone who's performing well or consistent, but you can provide them value. Another player that I'm excited about to try to trade for would be Diontae Johnson. I was loving him in the preseason. Bryce Young has hampered that value with his poor play, but now behind Andy Dalton, he should be getting those targets, should be converting into catches. Those drives should extend a little bit further to where he is someone who could be of value. He's been poor the first 2 weeks for sure, but you should be able to get him cheap for someone off your bench. Third trade target, let's do a third receiver. I like George Pickens a lot. He's the type of player that I really hated last year. If you start him, he goes 1 for 35. If you bench him, he goes for 4 for 135 and 2 touchdowns. He's that type of player. This week against Denver, 2 catches, 29 yards on 4 targets. He did have the Pat Surtain shadow, so one of the toughest matchups in the league. But he had a couple plays called back, a 51-yard reception and a touchdown. Running back target, Chuba Hubbard. If you need a running back for the next couple weeks and for cheap, give me Chuba, same reasons as Diontae Johnson. His price should be relatively low. And then Mark Andrews, a tight end target that I like, mostly because week 1 was so ugly. And then last week, he was much better, 5 for 51 on 5 targets. Not what you were drafting, but not bad. So he should be getting closer and closer as the offense develops. I don't know if you'll get him for cheap, but he's definitely someone that I like. Tank Dell's another one that I like. He's been kind of been buried in that wide receiver room. I think they're going to try to get him going this week. So that's a bonus. And a quarterback bonus can be Geno Smith. After disappointing last year, Geno is cooking again. The Ryan Grubb offense has been just phenomenal. I told you to trade for DK Metcalf last week. Hopefully you did. If not, too late. Geno's averaging 17.9 points per game and is QB 9. And against two pretty good defenses in the Broncos and the Patriots. The Dolphins just got lit up by just a loss to Tua, so this game could get out of hand. I expect them to... All right, let's talk about some game previews. On the docket tonight, you have the Patriots and the Jets. People I actually like in this game, if you're in a deeper league and you desperately need a starter, Braylon Allen got a lot of run on Sunday. Had 7 carries for 33 yards and a touchdown. He also had 2 catches for 23 yards and a touchdown. So Braylon Allen is someone who, because it's a Thursday night, because it's a short week, typically they simplify the offenses a little bit on Thursday night. A lot of people bet unders because it's a lot of times an ugly game. And since it's a shorter week, they ran Breece Hall quite a bit on Sunday. Look for Braylon Allen to have a pretty good game if you're in a deeper league. They're going to find out if this is the Garrett Wilson that we're just going to expect. He's going to get the Christian Gonzalez shadow, so that's going to be tough. So he might be another buy low candidate here next week. The Patriots, there's no real receivers you're looking at, but Ramondre Stevenson, Antonio Gibson, the Jets got run over by the 49ers. Expect Stevenson to have a good game, and we'll see if Gibson can repeat that 100-yard performance from last week. He had 96 yards on the ground, 7 yards in the air, a nice 11 points. He might be available if you're in a shallower league. He's only 31.9% rostered. In my 12-man leagues, he's already gobbled up, and so I really have no chance to get him. But he could be looking someone to add in the waiver wire, someone to look at after this week. All right, next game, Browns and Giants. Malik Neighbors, what can you say? He balled out last week. Love to see that continue. Should be a tough matchup defensively. The Browns should be winning, so that should give Neighbors a negative game script, which means, it gives the Giants a negative game script, which means the Neighbors getting the ball a lot, and that's what we like. Don't expect Daniel Jones. I called that shot last week, but I don't expect him to have a good game against a good Browns defense. I expect Amari Cooper to get going this game. It's now or never, but Deshaun has been so inconsistent that it's been hard to find. It'll be hard to start Amari if he doesn't ball out this week. Giants and Packers. I'm assuming no Jordan Love. They said 4 to 6 weeks initially, and this is just week 3. And they should win this game. The Titans haven't. They're 0-2 for a reason, and Will Levis keeps giving the ball away. I expect a big Josh Jacobs game. I expect the Packers to try to play defense and to shorten the game. This is one where, I drafted DeAndre Hopkins in a couple leagues, knowing it'd take a couple weeks for their knee injury, but the last 2 weeks have been really brutal. Only getting 1 catch on 1 target on week 1 and 1 catch on 2 targets in week 2. 17 yards for the season. Want to drop him? That's fine, but I expect him to be better after the bye week, which is week 5. So if you can hold him till week 5, great. If not, your skill positions for the Packers, you're really not starting anybody. That's just kind of the way it is, unless you're in a deep league and you have no choice. The Titans, Tony Pollard has established himself as the guy in that backfield. He had 16 carries, 82 yards, 3 receptions, 12 yards, 18 points in week 1. He had 17 carries, 62 yards, 5 for 40 week 2. He is the guy in the backfield. So when you care to Tajay Spears, who has gotten like a third of the opportunities, 4 carries and 4 catches in week 1. That's not bad. You can live with 4 catches, but 6 carries and 2 catches in week 2, which is not as much. This backfield has been established. It is Pollard 1. It is Pollard 1. It is Spears 2. Bears and Colts, man. Can we see something from Caleb Williams? And can we see who is the real Anthony Richardson? Obviously, if Richardson, you're still starting him. The only Bear that I would probably look to start in the wide receiver room is Moore. And that's because you probably don't have much of a choice. Maybe DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor, you're liking that. Alec Pierce, you're liking that. Michael Pittman was someone I was avoiding in the preseason, but if you drafted him, you don't really have much of a choice but to play him. Who else are you going to get? Your replacement level, unless you're in a 8-team league and you drafted really well, your replacement level for Michael Pittman's probably pretty low. But a disappointing start for sure. Houston and Minnesota, undefeated teams just like we thought. CJ Stroud was someone I had as a bust last week, and he did. The Bears are a good secondary. He just doesn't run. Minnesota had a good defensive effort against the 49ers, and of course a good one against the Giants. We'll see how their defense holds up against a really high-powered offense. For the wide receiver room, for the Texans, what can you say? It was Nico. It was always Nico. I was a Tank Dell believer just on cost, but man, it looks like Nico is by far the one you wanted. Jeff Diggs without the touchdown equity, he might be one to trade away if I were you. And Tank Dell, he's been rough this season to say the least. He's still getting targets. They might try to get him going. You can kind of beat the Vikings by throwing it over the top, and he's the over the top guy. So if it's not this week, it's not happening. The Vikings, both running backs, look pretty good. Aaron Jones has played well. He's questionable. Obviously, if he doesn't go, Ty Chandler's a must start. But the other one, of course, is Justin Jefferson. If you got him, you got to start him. He's one play away always from making your week. Sam Darnold has played well, but like I said I'm not sure if I said this last week or on the Ben and Case show, but if it weren't for that 97-yard touchdown pass, he's averaging less than 200 yards a game. He's not someone even worth streaming unless you're desperate. Joe Mixon for the Texans. If he plays, I'll be stunned. If he doesn't play, look for Cam Akers as a waiver wire pickup, maybe a streamer if you need him. He should be getting a lot of run if that's the case, because Dameon Pierce still struggling with a hamstring injury, and Cam Akers, he got the bulk of the run last week. He got 7 carries for 32 yards and 1 catch. And in a fun game, we have the Eagles and the Saints. I mean, the Saints should just keep rolling. The Eagles don't have a defense worth really much of anything. Carr's played great this year. He has only 9 incompletions on the season after 2 games. He's over 200 yards a game, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's been great. Kamara coming off that 5 touchdown game, playing him or Rashid Shaheed. I mean, at this point, 2 games in, you're starting to establish some patterns. So if you have Shaheed, man, play him. Offense should only be getting into more of a rhythm. I'm not saying it's going to be better. Don't expect 40 points a game, but man, I feel like Chris Olave is starting to start to pick up some more. He's projecting this week at 16 points. He had 12 last week. He had 6 targets as they routed the Cowboys. If this game's closer, then expect him to get more. Game 1 against Carolina, that's why he was a trade target. 2 catches for 11 yards, 3 points. But that game was such a rout that it was hard to take any information out of it. For your Steelers, man, they're going to commit to the run. You can start George Pickens, and that's really the only skill position, only wide receiver I would look to start. It's going to be a defensive battle. J.K. Dobbins has been a godsend. Go ahead and start him as well. But those are the only 2. I'm not loving Najee Harris. I mean, you probably have to start him, but not loving him this week. Not loving Jaylen Warren. I said in the preseason, if Wilson was a starter, I would like Jaylen Warren because of the dump-off pass ability, but he just hasn't gotten the targets with Justin Fields under center extending plays. Broncos, Buccaneers. I think this game's going to be a huge win by the Bucs. The Broncos offense just hasn't done anything. It's very horizontal. There's no throwing deep. They're clearly protecting Bo Nix. He's not ready for the bright lights. If you have Javonte Williams, he was great last week as far as grade is concerned for the RB2 flex range. Baker Mayfield's been a godsend. If you picked him up late off of waivers or if you draft him late, tough matchup. They're probably going to be running it a lot, but we'll see if Bucky Irving can start to establish himself a little more. He seemed to be taking more and more workload every week from Rachaad White, so give me Bucky Irving as a surprise pick here to do well. Chris Godwin has been awesome this year. Keep rolling with him, especially with Mike Evans getting probably the Pat Surtain shadow. Downgrade on Evans, but you're playing Mike Evans. The Raiders look to get a winning record against Carolina. Man, I'm liking Chuba this week. I'm liking Deontay Johnson this week. I know the Raiders have a tough defense, but I just like the fact that they're going to have a quarterback who is a professional quarterback and not Bryce Young. Zamir White, I mean, if it's not this week, it's not happening for Zamir White since the Panthers defense has nobody. And Gardner Minshew has played pretty well. He's a guy I actually really like overall. He's not doing much for fantasy, though, because they're going to want to run the ball. Big Zamir White week. Brock Bowers has been awesome. If you got sniped at tight end or in one of my leagues, I just kept waiting. People are just drafting him too high, in my opinion. There's an early tight end run, and I'm like, well, I'll just take all these awesome receivers. It's been fantastic. So if you have him, keep starting him. Keep rolling. Dolphins, Seahawks. I'm streaming the Seahawks defense this week because, well, obviously Tua is out. Ken Walker probably tracking to not play, in which case Charbonnet, the calf a guy said you should trade for last week. He balled out. I'm streaming Geno this week in one of my leagues. Big believer in the talent. Big believer in the offense. If you have Hill for the Dolphins, you're starting him. You're starting Achane, but obviously huge downgrade with Tyler Thompson as the quarterback. In a desperation game, the Baltimore Ravens and the Dallas Cowboys. And Lamar's played a lot of hero ball. They looked a lot better last week, running the ball more with Derrick Henry. And that did take away some of Lamar's top end because he got 25 points in week 1. And he only got 16 points in week 2. Big difference here was in the carries. He had 11 more carries in week 1 than week 2. Plain and simple. Big difference in the carries. Those carries instead went to Derrick Henry, which I expect more of this week. You can run on the Cowboys. The Saints showed. I think they're going to get pounding the ball. desperate for a win at 0-2. I think only 4 teams have gone 0-3 and made the playoffs in the modern era. So they're going to need that for the Cowboys. Man, we're going to see if CeeDee Lamb can get going. Other than the one big catch last week, he really hasn't done much this season. The timing's been off. This is why you don't hold out in camp, which is why you sign your guys early, Jerry. And Dak is not someone I'm looking to play this week if I can help it. Probably drafted him as a starter, but he has been disappointing so far. If you have a different option, might go with that. Rams 49ers. This game screams to me a big Jordan Mason game. Brock Purdy has a huge projection this week because of how depleted the Rams are. But I think this is going to be a defensive game. I think this is going to be a run the ball game. Yeah, Brock Purdy is projected on ESPN for 20 points. The problem I have with this is so far this season, he has a total of 23 points, 24 points, 10 and a little over 10 and almost 14. I mean, in this game, they were trailing at Minnesota. So I expect it to be up big, expect it to be more like the Jets game. If he can get a couple touchdowns, then he's looking maybe in the 16 range. But this projection of 20 points, I think that's a little bit ridiculous, especially without Debo, without CMC. Little bit ridiculous. And Cardinals, man, Jared Goff was bad last week, but he's playing a bad defense. If you need a streamer, I'm looking elsewhere. I streamed Jared Goff last week. No, thank you. David Montgomery's played well. Jahmyr Gibbs finally kind of showed us the Jahmyr Gibbs we wanted. Well, the one we drafted, but I mean, this backfield is a pure split. So I don't know if Jahmyr Gibbs is kind of capped at RB6 because he's never getting the CMC volume. It's plain and simple. Not even the Devon Achane volume right now. Jameson Williams, he's wide receiver 7 for the year. Back-to-back good games. 5 for 79 last week after his 5 for 121 and a touchdown the week before. Pretty good matchup. I mean, if you got him, you're probably rolling with him. It's going to be an offensive battle with the way Arizona's been playing. 9 targets and 11 targets the first 2 games. If he can get double-digit targets or close to that, I mean, he's definitely in the flex wide receiver 2 range. Amon-Ra St. Brown came back and played well last week, so you're starting him. Yeah, the real question is, if you have someone better, Jared Goff, then you better be playing him. The only other thing this week, once again, if you drafted David Montgomery, you got yourself a steal. He's the touchdown maker. He's the guy. 17 points, 16 points. The way he was being drafted as a wide receiver, as a running back 3/flex, he's far surpassed that. Far surpassed it. For the Cardinals, start James Conner, start Kyler Murray, start Marvin Harrison. You're starting your big dogs for sure. These Falcons, this is why I didn't draft Mahomes in the preseason. You're paying quarterback 1 price for a guy who he's quarterback 12 right now. He's averaging 14 points a game. He's got 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Atlanta's defense is no joke. I mean, if you have him, start him. And maybe he'll ball out, but I don't know. Not someone I was looking to draft. Not at all. Rashee Rice, I expect even more from him because without the running game, that quick passing game will be back. Love that. Travis Kelce, kind of now or never. It's a good matchup. The Falcons are 22nd against tight ends. I mean, if you drafted him, once again, you can't bench your best players. There's more regret in that. That's the emotional side. We're not robots. We're human beings.
I'm in a glass case of emotion!
You can't bench them. Jacksonville, Buffalo. And James Cook cooked last week. It's funny I said he's not the touchdown guy because he wasn't. He got half as many touchdowns last week as he did all season in his very dominant, very awesome. Thank heaven I started him in multiple leagues. 11 carries, 78 yards, 7.1 per carry, 2 touchdowns, 1 catch, 17 yards, and a touchdown. Repeat a 3 touchdown performance? No, but this is more the type of guy he is. The 71 yards, 3 catches, 13. If he gets a touchdown, then awesome. I mean, he's always been the borderline since Joe Brady took over. RB2/1, kind of that 10 to 12 range. He gets great volume. I mean, look at these opportunities. 22 opportunities and 12. And this game was a blowout, so some other guys got some run later. Only wide receiver I'd consider starting if I can is Khalil Shakir. And then it's lacking a little top end. He's only gotten 8 targets this year, 8 catches on 8 targets and a touchdown. So liking a little top end. But hey, If you got to deeper league. And Commanders versus the Bengals. That's partially why I went to trade for Ja'Marr Chase, is because he's playing an awful team this week and he should cook. I expect the Bengals to get back on track. Mike Gesicki, I told you to remember the name in the preseason. He balled out last week. It's clearly the best tight end that Joe Burrow ever played with. He had 7 catches, 91 yards on 9 targets for 16.1 points. Obviously negative game script, but the passing offense was back on it. Look at this schedule. Washington, Carolina, the next 2 weeks. They should be cooking. Zach Moss is someone I'm also looking at this week. If you can get him, he's probably pretty cheap. Told you in the preseason, once again, pass blocking back and a pass-heavy offense is the way to go. That's why Chase Brown hasn't gotten the run that Zach Moss has. The pass protection means he gets on the field, means he gets opportunities. You got to be on the field to get opportunities. So good luck this week. Hopefully another 5-1, 6-0 week for me this week.